One of the main errors to do with worship today is that worshippers are given the impression that worship is primarily about them rather than it being about God. And so they go to church, for instance, thinking primarily about having a nice time, enjoying themselves, when really worship ought to be about describing something of the worth of God. It's to do with bringing out something of who God is. And consequently, although it's true that as godly men and women engage in that act, they find a lot of fulfillment and blessing, but it's really not primarily about them. It's primarily about God. The regulative principle is basically a product of a generation that was forced to think hard about the worship of God. You will appreciate the fact that prior to the Reformation, the Catholic Church, and primarily here we think in terms of the Roman Catholic Church, had brought into the worship of God a lot of activities. They had a lot of ordinances, or what they would call sacraments. They had different vestments. The Reformers recognized that they were in a day and age when there were no inspired prophets. So they had to go back to the Bible and seek some principle. It boiled down to two things. One was, do we allow everything that the Bible forbids, or do we only allow what the Bible says we should allow? And so the Reformers basically divided into two camps, and those to whom the vast majority of Protestantism aligned itself went for what is called the regulative principle, which was basically saying that you only allow the elements of worship that God himself has prescribed, because it's about worshiping him. So surely he should tell us how he wants us to worship him. So that became the regulative principle, and it was almost like a fork that was used therefore to comb through the many things that at that stage were making up worship, and consequently they were able to say this should not be and this ought to be. It's sad that today's church has generally lost this principle, so that it's more an issue of just copying one another. You know, this was very nice at that church. Why don't we import it into our church as well so that we can enjoy ourselves? When really a former generation had a better way of addressing this matter.